All right, I was just going to review just real quick here to sort of bring us up to date. We're beginning to look at the arguments for God's existence, and the first section I want to look at has to do with what's called cosmological arguments, and that points to general characteristics of the world. And then we'll look at some lines of reasoning that are called teleological proofs. And this has to do with particular characteristics of the world. And I think that's what Brother Elon talked about last week, primarily. And so and then there are proofs based on the meaning between God and man. And this will take us to the moral argument. And we're going to skip this other one here. So here we go. Let's see, what slide number is that, Linda? This one right here. 23. That's 23. Okay. So we already looked at this slide. The argument is basically this. If the world exists and is contingent, what does contingent mean? It means it could have not have been. See, I'm a contingent being. You're a contingent being. Is my existence necessary? No. God is a necessary being. But everything else is dependent upon something. You could use the word dependent maybe, if you like that word better. But so the bottom line is everything that we can think of in this finite realm is contingent. And if that's the case, then there's got to be some kind of necessary being to account, for all of these other beings. Make sense? Okay, so the argument advances from the existence of the world, and we looked at these passages already, and I was getting down to this one, I think. The mark of contingency is change. Does everything have a beginning in time?
On earth.
Yeah. We're talking about contingent beings. Yes. These are just different ways I have selected to describe things. Things have a past, a present, and a future. Is that right? This book right here, this lectern, this chair, our existence, etc. And then I thought about the word potentialities. Several things we might view that away, like say a bulb, or anything that has to do with growth and development, and so forth. So that's another way to look at it. And then another way to look at change has to do with the capacity to decay, die, and perish. So I don't think this computer would really fit. It might fit decay because it will eventually decay in some sense, correct? But I don't really think I'd refer to the computer as something, well, I do say it died, don't I? It crashes, so it's dead, right? But I don't think the word perish, describes a computer very well. But at any rate, these are just different ways to look at, things that exist in our world. And we looked at that already. Got a question? Okay. All right. So everything that's changing is contingent. Can you name one thing in this finite earth that we're living in that's not changing? Everything is changing eventually. Is that right? Everything changes. It may be so slow that we can't even perceive it, but everything changes. So if that's the case, then that means that everything that we can think about in this world must have a sufficient reason, for its existence, or a sufficient reason to explain itself. And what is a sufficient reason? Can you read? That which... Thank you, David. David reads. That which explains the totality of a thing in all of its phases. Okay, so what if someone said, well, now, David, your parents can explain the totality of you, but yet we have a problem there. What about their existence? You see what I'm saying? Okay, so what is a sufficient reason? Now here's the 4 options that I've come up with. What is the sufficient reason for beings which change? Can they explain themselves? Can this lectern explain itself? No, it can't. Can a tree explain itself? No. Can a rock explain itself? Okay, so maybe if that's not the case, maybe it's explained by other beings of the same nature. That's not possible because you got the same problem, don't you? All right, what about nothing? Well, it's nothing explains it. Well, see, that's not viable, of course. What about this then? Explained by an unchanging being. Do you see what I'm driving at here? I told you this will be, probably the most complicated thing I'll say in all of our series, and this is really not that complicated. What we're talking about, everything in this world, has a certain trait, and that trait is that it's a changing thing. And so how do these changing things explain themselves, Brother Doug?
I just want to make sure we're not going to be tested on this.
I can give a test if you want one.
You can, yeah.
Okay, but doesn't this make sense?
Well, human beings can make attempts to explain the reason for themselves or somebody else, but as soon as that other person changes, then maybe that original reason isn't valid anymore because we're just guessing at why.
I think I've got the 4 alternatives right here. Can you think of something else? Everything that exists has got to either explain itself, or it's got to be explained by something else like itself, or it's got to be explained by nothing, which is ludicrous, or we're driven to accept the fact that there's some kind of being that's unchanging, that's eternal, that's infinite. And we call that being God. Okay? All right. So, a changing being cannot account for its own being. A changing being cannot account for other beings. That is, it cannot provide the sufficient reason. So a necessary being is the only possible explanation. Okay? What do you think? You like it? You don't like it? What about it, Doug?
I mean, to me, I just sum it up as everything points to a creator.
Yeah. But what we're trying to do here is if you're talking to somebody like that, they're going to say, why? Okay, so why is that the case? And the reason that it points to a creator is because of its nature. See, our nature, none of us can explain ourselves. Nothing in this world can be the ultimate explanation, of itself. Now, there's some objections, and I told you I'm going to hardly even look at these. One objection is that, well, okay, David, we agree that everything in nature is contingent, or it depends on something for its existence, but the whole of nature, is non-contingent. Well, my response to that is nature does not exist as a whole in distinction from its individual parts. But I know you don't like that anyway, so I'm going to move on, okay? All right. Another objection is that, well, the causal process is infinite. And so what they'll say is, well, David, you can't explain yourself, but your parents. Yeah, but my parents can't explain themselves, and therefore what? Their parents. And so then what happens? You got to do what next? You got to go to their parents. You got to go to their parents, and so forth. And so then they say an infinite series is what ultimately explains everything.
I
What do you think about that?
think
Hollywood kind of gets close to that, trying to say there's multiple realities and multiverses, and we got here from aliens seeding the planet. But I mean, somewhere you got, like you said, you got to go back. Okay, where did your aliens come from, or where did your other universes come from?
Right.
You still got to have a starting point.
Any sum is still going to be finite, in nature. And speaking of that, what do y'all think about this? All this stuff I'm hearing in the news about aliens and UFOs. I just don't think I don't think God sent the Lord Jesus to the earth to die for us and then said, well, let me think about another Savior and we'll send him to some other planet somewhere. I don't know. That has nothing to do with anything, sorry. But it bugs me a little bit. Okay, and then here's another one. And there are folks, for this guy Hume here, you don't know that name, but he was a Scottish philosopher, David Hume. He wrote a book called The Treatise of Human Nature, which I had to read, and I was very happy when I finished that. But he says that you cannot prove the causal principle empirically. Now, what does it mean to say something is empirically proven? That means what I can see, what I can touch, what I can smell. And so he says you can't prove that empirically. Well, a couple of things there. So he's denying cause and effect. Well, if that's the case, then what about this idea that he's got? Is he the cause of that idea? See, how could he deny cause and effect if he's the cause of that idea? But every person I've ever talked to about this, every atheist that I've ever talked to, or skeptic or so forth, I've said, and I know that if you step out in front of a train, you're going to be hit by the train, and then people are going to say, what caused his death? The train. I mean, I'm just a no-nonsense guy. That just makes sense to me. All right. So let's move on to this one right here. All right, this is argument. Have you heard of this argument before? I know you have. The argument to design. It's also called the teleological argument. And I don't see my eraser. I forgot to bring my stuff. Well, anyway. Okay, this word, you remember this word? We talked about that in John. In the beginning was the Word was with God. The logos, it means word, translated word in John 1:1, but it also can mean account of or reason. And so like biology, the bio part, from a Greek word bios, which means life, and the logos part, account of. So biology is about what? The account of what? Life. Paleontology, the account of what? Rocks. Zoology, the account of zoos. No, just kidding. But at any rate, when you see this on the end of something, it has to do with the account of. Like theology, the first part from the word theos, which means God. The logos part, account of what? Account of God. So if you study theology, you're studying about reason or discourse about God. So this word right here means end. It can mean aim. It can mean purpose. End, aim, purpose. It's used in the book of Hebrews 13 times, translated perfect many times. Okay? What's Hebrews about? Everything's better, right? The word better is used 13 times in Hebrews. And then you might render it with the word final, F-I-N-A-L, final. So Hebrews is about what? The old law's gone, what? The new's in, you see? And it's better, okay? So what this argument is about is called the teleological argument, and so it is an argument that gives account of purpose, reason about aims, okay? But it's popularly known as argument to design. Now, let me mention this. Notice my slide says to design, not from design. It's a slight distinction, but we say to design because what we're trying to do is reason to design. We're not trying to reason from design. If we reason from design, we're already assuming what we got to prove. I can tell y'all are totally excited about that. After half a century of teaching, I pick up on things like that, okay? All right, so bottom line of this argument is this. There are only two explanations for the universe and man. Only two. Can you guess what they are? Well, there it is. Either God or what? Or chance. It's either God or chance. It's either intelligence or non-intelligence. Got a comment?
That don't make sense.
It doesn't? Who says that? Larry, this doesn't make sense? You want to redraw the slide then? What doesn't make sense?
Just the idea of chance. It's like, it just doesn't make sense.
Oh, I thought you was talking about the slide. No. Yeah, but can you come up with other alternatives? I'm trying to think, how does all this come to be? It either comes to be by intelligence, God Almighty, or what? It just happened. I mean, that's what the evolutionist has got to say. We're going to talk a little bit about that. It just happened.
David,
Yeah.
there's quite a number of controversies among scientists today about the fine-tuning of the universe. The numbers that are out there are absolutely astounding. Even atheists will say, I don't see how it can be so finely tuned. Atheists are having trouble with their own philosophy now. I was going to get into that, but
Yeah.
time ran out.
Brother Elon says, oh, by the way, I want to make an observation here. Do you know where's Brian? Is Brian in here? No, he's not in here. Or Brother Kyle. Whoever's teaching auditorium class, frequently if someone makes a comment, then the teacher will repeat it, for the people who are streaming, okay? Well, I listened to it Wednesday night. I was out of town. I got in, when did I come home? Friday. I got home Friday, and I heard every comment from everybody in the audience. So has something been done with the sound system, Larry?
No, basically, the microphones have been there all along. Did they? I've been corrected.
Do what?
I believe there's some new mics hanging.
Well, I'm just saying if you teach in the auditorium, it's not necessary to repeat everybody's comment. Because, it was clear.
It's not clear in here. No, it's not clear to those in the auditorium. No, you can't, I can't.
Oh, not clear to the ones in the auditorium.
Right.
Oh, I thought the problem was with the people that were streaming. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, disregard everything I just said. Keep repeating the comments because it's not clear to the audience. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, here we go. Now, the starting point for this argument, let's look at some passages. Psalm 19:1. Elon, would you turn to that one for me? John, would you turn to 139:14? And let's see. Terry, would you like to take one?
Yes.
Okay, if you would like to. Okay, Romans 1:20 and 21. And I'm picking on everybody up here. I'm sorry. Let me go back yonder. L.A. Acts 14:17. How about that one? Let's read from our good book, and we're ready.
The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork.
Okay, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. So see, the starting point for this line of reasoning is looking at the world and the handiwork that's there, and then determining what we can learn from the handiwork of the world. Okay? All right, Psalm 139:14.
I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well.
Okay, David says, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works. I don't know how anybody could be a physician and not believe that there's some higher power. You know, really. The human body is just so complex. And then with the discovery of DNA, it's just amazing. In the 70s, you know the name Thomas Warren. I helped Dr. Warren quite a bit with his debate with Anthony Flew, the atheist in Denton, Texas, and then Wallace Matson. I worked with him in both of those, drew a lot of his charts for him. That was in the day when we used overhead transparencies and stuff, and I could print just like him, and so I drew a lot of his materials and so forth. But Dr. Flew was arguing, against the existence of God. But before he died, he wrote a book entitled "There Is No God," with a mark through the word "no." And what convinced him was DNA. And of course, we'd like to think that, Dr. Warren's emphasis on the design argument that we're looking at it now, might have influenced him, in that direction. Okay. I'm just overwhelmed with the complexity, of our bodies. It's just incredible. Okay, Terry, was it you?
For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse, because, although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, but were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Okay, Romans 1:20 and 21, the substance of this is this. The invisible things of him, what's the antecedent of him? God. So the invisible things of God are clearly seen by what? The things that are made. And if you don't like the word seen, you could say, made evident or something, like that. And then I can't see Linda again. Is Linda gone? Well, no wonder I can't see her. Okay. I thought, well, that pole's moved. Okay. So here's a verse that is telling us that we can move from that which we can see, smell, hear, etc. We can make a move from there to the unseen. Everybody with me? All right, what about Acts 14:17? Is that L.A.? All right, Larry, wait a minute.
Can you go back and explain what you just said?
I said Romans 1:20 and 21 is saying to us the invisible things of him, the antecedents God, are clearly seen by the things that are made. And so here's a verse that's telling us that we can reason from what our senses can experience to that which we cannot experience with our senses.
Clearly, what you're seeing has to have something that made it. It couldn't just happen, is what it's saying.
Yeah. What am I missing here, Larry?
Well, when serving as a character witness, I basically started to give some of my opinions. And the judge told me that I'd limit myself to what I had seen or heard, or I'd be dismissed from my stand.
Okay.
I had to speak to what I had seen and could give the evidence that I'd seen.
Sounds like a good judge to me.
David, I gave out slip of paper to everyone in the class, which talks about those things which we cannot see. DNA was one of them, but we can through mathematics, 1.618. That number right there describes a whole lot of what we have in nature from God.
Okay. Everybody got that paper that Elon handed out? I need to get one of those from you. Okay, so at any rate, all this argument is saying is that we can go from what we can see to that which we cannot see. And so what we're saying is we're going from the evidence of the world and our human body to the existence of God. Okay? All right, L.A.?
Nevertheless, he did not leave himself without a witness, and that he did good, gave us rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, filling our hearts with food and gladness.
Okay? Help me remember to bring my eraser. We don't know where an eraser is.
Look that up and see if it's under.
Well,
I got a handkerchief in that
yeah.
drawer.
Ain't nothing here. Okay. All right. Now, Larry, get me a paper towel.
I'm going.
Okay. I didn't know you were going. What does the Bible say about rebuking an elder? Does it say, don't rebuke an elder? Okay. All right. Now, so here's the reasoning of this argument. The argument is saying, let me just do a little line here. So the argument is saying if there's order, that dot means and adjustment. All right, that's what the argument says. Thank you. Did you dampen it? You look a gift horse in the mouth. Okay. All right, thank you. That works pretty well. I wouldn't have thought that. Okay. All right. So there's you got order. I guess you want me to write it out, don't you? And adjustment. Do I have to? All right, arrangement. That'll do also. But that'd be the first premise. If there's order and adjustment, then there's design. That's what it boils down to. So here's the reasoning. If it's raining outside, it's wet. It is raining outside, therefore it is what? Wet. Linda says, if you'll go get some cornmeal, I'll make you some cornbread. I go get the cornmeal, she makes cornbread. My daddy said, boy, you do that again, I'm going to beat you to death. But that was not literal. I'm going to whip your britches. So I do that again, then I get my britches whipped. We do it all the time. We reason all the time. That way. That's all this is saying. If there's order and arrangement in the universe, then guess what? There's got to be some kind of design. So the next premise would be there is order and arrangement, therefore there's design. But then what you do after that is you say, wow, this thing is recessed. That's weird. How did it do that? Okay. If there's design, then that means what? There must be a designer. Must be a designer. Can't have design without a designer, can you, Doug? No, sir. You can't have design without intelligence. As soon as anybody admits design, if you ever talk to someone who's a skeptic, you may not have had an opportunity. Depends on who you study the Bible with. But as soon as they admit that there is design in this world, then it's easy. You're home free. Because you cannot have design unless you got some kind of intelligence. Who came up with the design? You got to have a designer, right? All right. And all of that's what we just looked at. Okay. Now let's define these words. Order. What does the word order mean? Interrelated in such a way as to constitute regularity. Boy, there's some big words, it looks like, aren't they? So, interrelated in such a way as to constitute regularity. Okay, so what would be an example of that? We already mentioned it one day. The earth is tilted on its axis 23.5 degrees. Makes a revolution every what? 24 hours. It has a moon 240,000 miles away that does its thing every 30 days. And the earth and the moon revolve around the sun every, how often? 365 1/4 days. Now what's interesting to me is in that rotation around the sun, the earth departs a straight line by 1/9 of an inch every 18 miles. So in 18 miles from point A to point B, it moves 1/9 of an inch. It moves 1/9 of an inch. Whatever way you want to call it. Okay. It's not, if it was just a straight line all the time, it wouldn't go around the sun, right? But notice this, it doesn't move by 1/8 of an inch. It doesn't move by 1/10 of an inch. Either one of those, according to what I've studied, life could not be sustained. We'd either burn up or freeze to death. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I mean, that kind of makes my day. It is so intricate. You know, it points to your comment, Elon, about it's so finely tuned. I mean, how did that happen? Was there this giant explosion and all of a sudden, you know, things just sort of settled down and became so finely tuned?
Did anybody ever see order out of chaos, an explosion, anything other than chaos? The Big Bang would be chaotic.
I told someone one time, they said, well, David, it all started with a Big Bang. I said, well, I agree with that. They, really? I said, yeah. I said, God made the bang. Then he gave order. He gave order to all of it. All right, Doug?
I was just going to point out something that came to my mind when you're talking about order is like the animal kingdom and the reproduction. The Old Testament is several verses that's referenced after its kind.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's always after its kind.
Right.
There's no variation from after its kind.
Have you been to see the ark? Okay. Did you notice the signs that gave some explanation as to how all the animals got on the ark? Do y'all remember reading those signs? Or did you just look? You should read the signs. It explained about getting kinds on the ark, like Doug is saying. So what does that mean? They didn't put 2 poodles on there and 2 Rottweilers and 2 Chihuahuas, you know, and 2 German Shepherds. They put 2 canines on it. That's what I believe. And 2 bovine and 2 feline. Everything after its kind. So all this other stuff came about as a result of man, you know, doing things like getting a pick-a-poo from a poodle and a Pekingese, right? Or what was that? Somebody the other day, I said, what kind of dog is that? And they said it was a Labradoodle or Labradoodle. Is that a Labrador and a poodle? That's just shameful, it seems like. But at any rate, okay, now what about arrangement? Or I put the word adjustment up there. Arrangement. Give me an example of arrangement. It means adaptation of parts to an end, means to an end. Okay. All right, let's see. Can we think of something else? Thank you, Larry. Wait a minute, here's one. What about the, wait a minute. I should have brought my notes.
How about
photosynthesis.
I was going in that direction. What about plants
Yeah, go.
putting out
Go, that's what I wanted to hear.
carbon dioxide, and we breathe out oxygen? When we swap it, you know, if we both did the same thing, it wouldn't last very long.
Isn't that photosynthesis, or is it?
Well,
No, that's not photosynthesis, is it? What is photosynthesis?
that's plants turning the sun's rays into
Taking light and turning
food.
it into.
Okay. Well, the carbon dioxide cycle, I guess.
That's what I was talking
Yeah, that's what was on my mind. I just used the wrong word. Plants making oxygen and
Animals making CO.
okay.
Change.
Sounds like it sounded. I'm sorry, but y'all sounded like the Israelites for a minute there. Murmur, 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 murmur. Okay, so what do plants put out? Oxygen. What do we put out? Carbon dioxide. What does the car put out? No. Got off the path there, didn't I, for a minute? Okay, but at any rate, adaptation of one thing to another thing. I read one time about, let's see, I wish I'd have thought about this earlier, but it has to do with, some of you may know more about this, I'm sure you do, because I'm just going from a distant memory. But there's this bird that will lead a bear. It flies overhead and it leads a bear to a beehive, to a honeycomb. Y'all ever heard of that? And so then the bear goes over there and tears up the honeycomb, gets some of it, and then it leaves something for the bird. But the bird couldn't go because all the bees or something. Have you any of you thought about anything like that? Larry, have you heard about any of that?
No, but it's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Brother Larry, would you enjoy researching that a little bit for us? Thank you so much. We look forward to hearing what you got to say next week.
Can I go to Google right now?
No. Anyway,
It's the greater honey glide, a small African bird that leads people to wild bees.
leads people, not a bear.
Well, I sure it was.
The greater, did y'all hear that? What's the name of it?
Greater honey glide, South African bird.
All right, a greater honey glide, a bird in South Africa that leads people to what? To bees. Is that not crazy? That would be an example of what I'm talking about. Adaptation of means to end. One thing depending on another thing, for its existence. Okay? Now, the argument goes like this. If there's order, let me go. I got to get back to my,
David,
yeah.
It leads a honey badger to a beehive. The badger breaks it open, and the two share the honey.
There you go.
The bird eats the wax and bee larvae after the badger has taken the honey.
Did y'all hear that? That's, I said bear. It was a badger.
It was a badger,
Okay. That right.
which is just as bad.
But isn't that not really cool? And see, that means that that bird has an instinct that causes it to do that, correct? And the badger has an instinct that causes it to do what it does, correct? See, it's means to end. It's one thing dependent upon another thing. Okay, so the argument goes like this. If there's order and adjustment, there's got to be design. If there's design, then there's got to be a designer. Okay? And that takes us, I was going to illustrate it with a watch, but we'll stop there.